In a world where many people see reality as a circle or a rectangle, the truth is that issues are cylinders. Rather than a two-dimensional understanding, we will flush out the three-dimension complexities through nuanced conversation and civil, respectable discourse to highlight all perspectives on controversial issues. I'm your host, William Roosh, a high school teacher who's trying to transform education as we know it. Welcome to the Anti-Echo Chamber. This is Cylinder Radio. Hello and welcome to the next installment of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, high school teacher and now podcast host. And today I have on Clarissa Phalen. Did I say that right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Clarissa Phalen. She is a San Antonio police officer, Texas Army National Guard. And we are going to talk about being a police officer and what it's like to be in the police and be in law enforcement and things like that. So, Clarissa, thank you for doing this. We finally got around to working it around our schedules.
Yes, and thank you for having me. It's an honor, privilege. So,
trust me, the honor's mine. I'm not doing what you're doing every day. So. Tell us a little bit about you, your background. What gives you credibility to come here and talk about being a cop, essentially?
So I've been an officer for 3 years now. I'm a mom of 2 children, and that's the reason why I took on policing. After I completed my military training, I was a manager at a barbecue restaurant, and it just wasn't exciting anymore. After you come back from all the military training, shooting rifles and learning all the military aspects of training. So I saw a billboard and they were needing females. So I figured, why not try it? And if I get through all of the testing, because there's physical testing, written testing, polygraph tests, psychological tests, if I get through all of that and it's meant to be, then it's meant to be. So that's kind of how I came on to being a police officer. From there, I've been on patrol for 3 years, and I just recently got moved to the training academy, where now I am a PT instructor and I'm a TCO analyst, where I keep all of the current officers' licenses for Texas current for SAPD.
Oh, wow. So when you say that they were looking for female officers, like, why would we need female officers? Like, what does that mean?
We would need female officers for a variety of reasons. Since I've been on the job, I've seen that a lot of victims, sexual assault victims, family violence victims, they feel a lot more comfortable talking to female officers. Okay. I feel as though mother or not, they feel a comfort in a female being there versus sometimes their offender being a male. They don't want to talk to a male, having gone through whatever traumatic event they have gone through. They want to talk to a female. Little kids, whether male or female, they feel more comfortable talking to me, or sometimes they won't respond at all to certain questions, because some questions, the details that we need in order to write the proper reports and have the proper details in our offense reports, they can get a little, the details aren't great. So to get a child to talk to you and give you those details sometimes is quite difficult.
Yeah, and after I asked him, that maybe that wasn't a very clear question. I wasn't sure if it was like a legal thing, like when you're at the airport and a man can't like pat down, a woman or something like that. Like I wasn't sure if there were things that they needed women to do, that there was some sort of legislation in place where men can't do it. But it seems like it's more just the idea of having, a diverse crew. Some people are going to be better at certain things and other people be better at other things. And that just gives us a more robust police department. That seems to be more what it is.
So as far as the female aspect of the things that our department mandates females to do is we do all female searches. So if there is somebody that needs to be searched for possible narcotics or weapons, if it's not an imminent threat to where the male, a male officer can see that they have a gun or knife and need to take it for their safety right away, then they'll handcuff them and wait until a female officer can come out and search them, just to mitigate any other issues that can come up from a male searching a female. And as far as female transports, juvenile females, female officers have to transport juvenile females. Otherwise, a male officer has to double up with another male officer. So 2 male officers in one vehicle to transport a juvenile female.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So why I wanted to talk to a police officer, and I think it fits with what I'm trying to do here with Cylinder Radio of addressing controversial issues, is police have always kind of been controversial in one way or another. But today there's controversy from kind of both sides. And I think that you can touch on both of them, because I think that there is, like, maybe on the political spectrum, it's like the left and the right, like conservative and liberal and all that stuff. And I think that one side would say that having, female officers there's a negative to that, because you're not 6'3", 230 pounds. Like, what happens? Aren't you going to be, unable to do your job or some sort of thing like that? And then on the other side of the political spectrum would be the idea that cops are bad and cops are racist and they're blah, 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 all that stuff. So that's the stuff that I kind of want to get into a little bit. So maybe just start with the fact that you are a woman and, you're not a gigantic, muscle-bound guy like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson or something like that. So how does that come up or play a role in you being able to do your job? And just to get some background to this, in jiu-jitsu, I was sparring with a guy who was a police officer. And I said, do you ever use jiu-jitsu when you're out in the field? And he's like, no, not really. He's like, when I'm out there, I have the great equalizer. So we were talking about his gun. He's like, so no, like I have a lot of tools that make it not necessary. I don't need to rely on, in this case, martial arts, but that would be brute strength and stuff. So that kind of changed my perspective a little bit about the job, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Right. So I'm about 5'3.5". I'll claim 5'4", just my boots. And I'm about 140 pounds. And right. I would say I'm about the average size female in the department. We have some that are smaller, some that are bigger. And there used to actually be a height requirement to get on our department. So there was a lot less females at that time because there aren't many females that are, above 5'10" or whatever the height requirement was at that time. But as far as my physical stature being a disadvantage, it is a disadvantage. Now that I'm at the training academy, I tell the females here, we are not men. We aren't ever going to be men. And no matter how hard we train, we're not going to be as strong as a 6'3", 250-pound male. It just will not happen. So when we train, you have to train to be smarter, more observant as far as the human behavior and furtive movements and recognizing clues and signs as to when someone is thinking about possibly running or pulling a gun or just that suspicious behavior that you need to recognize and learn quickly, because otherwise you will be at a disadvantage very quickly. Your jiu-jitsu partner was correct in saying that we have the great equalizer. And I would say I use my taser more than anything as the intermediate weapon of choice, simply because it's going to be a 5-second electricity ride for the individual versus using our ASP or our CB, a baton, where that would leave bruising and possible broken bones. And the taser, it'll shock the body and the muscles in the body and cause compliance. As long as everything's working correctly, it'll cause complete compliance and there's no aftermath to it. They have, 2 prongs that come out and that's the end of that. You're able to handcuff and be done with it. So
that's actually really cool, Clarissa, because the idea that because you have certain physical disadvantages, you are going to have other advantages, which is a heightened sense of awareness, being able to read a situation differently and maybe more keenly, because if you were some giant, linebacker type, then you would maybe let your guard down. And maybe this is a situation day in and day out where you should have your guard up and be aware and have that awareness about what's happening. And so it's funny, like what we consider disadvantages, when you do a closer inspection, maybe they're not. And there's so many ways that can come up in society.
And I would say our biggest, I don't know what the correct word would be, but shield or tool is our verbal judo, is what we call it. Our ability to talk through situations, de-escalate situations, calm people down, just using words and evaluating the situation and kind of seeing where the individual's mental state is and being respectful in it. Because at the end of the day, you take everything away, status, race, everything else. Any person wants their dignity and respect at the end of the day. So as long as you're using dignity and respect in how you speak to them, the majority of the time, I would say 99% of the time, you're not going to have any issues. And as far as use of forces, in the 3 years, I used my taser one time.
Wow.
And that's for someone with my stature. So
yeah, I mean, that's I think gets us to the second kind of controversial thing, which is the bad press that police officers get. And it's not equal. There are so many good police. I'm not just saying this because you're here. Like, I really believe this truly based on everything, not just based on like Roland Fryer's Harvard study looking into stuff, and like not just like based on data, based on personal experiences and things like that, that most cops are doing really, really good things that are helping the community. And then there are a few bad apples, quote unquote. And unfortunately, it's a job where, there are certain jobs where bad apples just like have a bigger negative impact, and a lot more eyes and attention is given to the few officers who escalate situations and don't de-escalate them. Your verbal judo is so important. So you show up somewhere and someone is in a heightened spot. They're stressed. They're scared. You're stressed. You're scared. You have to be the one to lower it all down, calm it all down. And sometimes some people don't do that. And it's for legitimate reasons. In my class, I show some of the horrible stories of, Tamir Rice or Philandro Castile and like those stories. But then I show someone walking up to a car and someone pulls out a gun, shoots him right away. Like, this isn't as clear cut as the media makes it look on either side. You have no idea what you're walking into every time. It's damn near an impossible job to do by my estimation. It is stressful. It's really, really difficult. And how has this lately, I mean, I know you've said you've only been doing it for 3 years, but do you feel like the negative press is making it harder for you to do your job in some way? Do people have like an F the police mentality a little bit?
There are quite a few that have that mentality. And I feel as though that has grown even in the last 3 years that I've been on, and hearing stories from prior to when I joined the police department on how things used to be done. I feel as though where the police officer's word was enough to testify against someone, that isn't enough. It's now, where's the body cam? Where's your body camera? Where is the code band from your patrol vehicle? Let's see all angles. We have this person's cell phone video and it shows this. Why is that? Versus the officer being able to testify, this is what I was feeling, this is what I saw. Because in those stressful situations, your senses don't all work appropriately when you're in that, that stressful situation. You may only see certain things because of tunnel vision. You may only hear certain things. If you happen to shoot your weapon, your ears will be ringing to where you can't hear anything.
Right.
So there are plenty of factors that go into that, but I would say that police officers are scrutinized more than ever now, and now we're being sued both criminally and civilly, whether or not we're convicted. That's a thought that goes through your head when you should be thinking only about going home and what you need to in that moment. And instead it's, what are the repercussions? You know, am I going to end up on the news for making a poor choice, when sometimes we don't even have a second to make a clear, reasonable decision. It is walking up to a traffic stop and a possible gun just, you know, shooting at you. And you, so that's why, you know, they do give advice to drivers. I think also in driver's ed now, you know, if during a traffic stop, you keep your hands on the wheel, 10 and 4, very basic, you follow the officer's commands. But when you encounter someone that is immediately not doing what they should be, then our senses are heightened in, well, what else are they going to do? Or,
of course. Yeah. I mean, John McWhorter is a professor at Columbia, and he has, you know, broken down all of the for every story of, you know, an unarmed black man killed by white police officers or something like that. There are many that are interchangeable with what kind of stuff happens, and you know, police officers being attacked, and then one person was a different race or what gender or whatever it is. Like, it's just certain things have this like the media's attention because they're trying to push this narrative, and it's bigger than just pushing a narrative or trying to sell clicks or whatever. It's affecting things, and in not a good way. So people are just angry at police pull you over. Now you have someone who's additionally angry because they've been fired up because they were looking at something on social media. And it's just, you're not helping the situation by pushing this narrative that really isn't even true.
Right. And education is so powerful in that aspect, where education, as far as knowing what you're talking about, as well as the things that people are watching on social media, because that can be bad education at the same time, like you were saying. And our department actually offers for like Black Lives Matter, those types of groups that come in and you know, they march and they have their causes, and their statistics are sometimes skewed, like skewed,
yeah.
like you was mentioning. Our tactics village is what we call it. They offer simulators. They offer real life scenarios where they will give them sim guns with sim rounds, similar to paintball guns. And they'll put them through situations and scenarios and allow them to shoot when they feel threatened. And most of the time they'll unload their whole clips.
Yeah.
It's a cell phone being pulled out, or it's, you know, someone just getting in their face because they are so scared and don't know how to control themselves in that stressful situation.
And that's just a simulation.
Right, exactly.
They know that. I've seen that like on YouTube, where they take someone who wrote an article disparaging police and they put them in there like, oh, this is a lot harder than I thought. It's like, and you're in control. Your life's not even really in danger.
Exactly.
I loved after the issue that happened actually in your state in Dallas with the guy who was not like claimed by Black Lives Matter, but in the name of Black Lives Matter shot a bunch of police officers. The Dallas police chief basically had a really awesome speech where he said, look, get off the picket line and enlist. Come, we'll put you in your neighborhood. We'll put you in your neighborhood. You can patrol your neighborhood and you can be a part of the solution. If they're like, so I'll give like a lesson on teaching something in history class, you know, War of 1812, and the kids will be like, this lesson sucks. It's like, well, give me another one. I'm doing the best I can. So give me something better. And when you're critiquing police officers, like, then you do something. It's really interesting because, like you said, you were managing a barbecue restaurant and you decided to jump into this really difficult world to like, what were you thinking? like why? Like what? So many people should be doing that, because the only way things can really get better in any realm in society is if you model that behavior. If you are willing to do it. It's easy to tell someone else to do something better, but it's hard to hold yourself to that standard. So what made you decide to go down this route? Was it something practical? Like it's a good steady job? Was it, I want to try and serve? Like what was it? Was it just like you said in the beginning, like to get something a little bit more thrilling? Like,
it was a little bit of the more thrilling as far as after returning from military training back to the job I had been doing for 6 years. It was kind of weighing whether or not I wanted to continue doing that for the rest of my life. Did I want to continue working 80 hours a week and barely seeing my kids after working, 12 or 14-hour shifts to make sure the store was running right? Or do I want to find a different career field? And after receiving the military training, the San Antonio Police Department is very paramilitary organized. Structure is similar. The training is very similar. And a lot like a deployment, every day, I don't want to say it's like you're going necessarily to the battlefield, but you're there to protect those that need protecting and to serve the community in whatever capacity, whether it's civil and it's an exchanging of children and you're trying to keep the peace, or, something that's escalated further. Either way, you are the peacekeeper. I think that's the best way to put it. And after becoming a mom, I feel like this is the best job to role model for my kids, to show them that even though I'm not perfect, I'm still a human being. I want to make a difference in my community and in the lives of other children growing up, because I want the community that my kids are growing up in, to affect that community if I can in a positive way.
Yeah, and you're walking the walk. It's very easy to just critique people telling their kids, oh, this, the people are screwing up this society, blah, 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 but to actually do it's really awesome. So what would a typical day be like for a cop? The reason I ask is because, I don't know. I see them sometimes just at the park, and they're just hanging out. I'm are they hanging out? Are they patrolling? What does it look like for your average day? Do you just drive around? Do you just drive around with certain areas? Do you what does it look like? What's your day like as a police officer? How long are the shifts? I'm really curious.
So as a patrol officer, when you first break out of the academy, the shifts are either 8-hour shifts or 10-hour shifts. The one that I worked was a 10-hour shift. So it's 4 days on, 3 days off, 10 hours apiece. Now, if you have a late call, then your day can easily be 15, 16 hours. But I liked that I had 3 days off. So essentially I was getting a mini vacation every.
Yeah.
So all of our days start out with roll call. We show up to the substation we're assigned. They take roll call and they tell you what district you're working that day.
And it changes. It always changes.
It can. So for rookies or for boot officers, it does until you become a district officer. And then when you become a district officer, then you have the same assigned district every day. And you're able to, I feel like, make better connections with those in your district when you're working that every day as well.
Mm-hmm. With talking about I'm sorry, are you talking about make better connections with the people who live there?
Right, because that's your same district. So you're going to the same convenience stores, you're going to the same restaurants, and your biggest resources are the citizens in that district. If something happens and they know you and they have that relationship, that good relationship with you, then they're more likely to give you information that's needed when something happens.
That is so important. That's something that I think is being lost a lot of times is people don't live in the neighborhoods that they patrol. And even if you don't live in it, if you're not even known, if you're only known for showing up for bad reasons, then that builds a stigma. If you don't form some sort of relationship, you don't actually help people. They don't see you as someone who is helping them. Those relationships are really crucial. So that makes sense that's part of what your job is. You go into this liquor store that's been robbed a couple of times. You get to know the owner. They're seeing you as someone who's going to help me. Oh, wow, you're helping me run my business. I'm an immigrant and I'm trying to make ends meet, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's important. I actually wrote that down in my notes about the issue of forming connections to those in the community that you patrol. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah. So after roll call, we find out the area that we're working, then we'll go and we'll get our patrol vehicle. And now for San Antonio, I know other departments are different. We do not take our vehicles home. They stay at the substation, and they're assigned to different districts, just as we get assigned when we sign on for work each day. So then we'll get gas, we'll load up all of our gear, which include different types of reports, different checklists, our rifles for, any type of long gun type necessity. And from there, as a patrol officer, you're there to take calls 911 calls, emergency calls. So you want to be, right now we are shorthanded. We have about 2,500 officers on the department, but we are pushing about 1.8 million citizens in San Antonio, and we're annexing even more. So to only have that amount of officers compared to the population, we are very short. And it takes, 8 months in the academy, 3 months FTO rides, and then cadets are still on probation for another year. So it could take potentially up to 2 years to truly train officers to be able to add them to our numbers.
Well, maybe we can turn this into a recruitment, like for young people listening. I know I'm in LA, they have reserve officers, just, again, this is how change happens. It doesn't happen by you posting something on Facebook. It happens from you going out, sacrificing something. 8 months. You got to do a lot of push-ups. You got to do a lot of stuff. You got to really work your butt off. But that's how change always happens. But people are resistant to do that. And let me ask you something. So I'm a school teacher. I'm a father of 2. I live a pretty buttoned-down life. But when there is a police officer driving behind me on the street, I get nervous. Like, why is it because it's a power thing? Like, why is it that when a lot of people, and I actually asked a poll on my Instagram about this, but when you see a police officer or a police car, why is it that the go-to is, and not, whew? Like, it should be something like, oh, good, police officer's behind me. Cool. That means if I get into a crash or blah, 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 if something happens, like if my tail light's out, he'll just tell me, or she'll just tell me. Like, it should be something that makes us feel more comfortable, more secure. But for many people, it doesn't. Like you, I'm sure you're aware of that. Like, how do we change that stigma around people in your profession so that when I see a police car on the side of the road or behind me, or I'm next to them, I'm not super nervous. Like, oh no, like I don't have like bags of cocaine in the trunk or anything like that. But like, I'm nervous that something, because you have this power. You have a power where you could make my life very, very difficult. You can make my life a lot harder, or you can make my life a lot better. And that's a lot of power to give someone in society. It's scary to be around that. And that's from me, who's never really had a bad interaction with police officers. So I can only imagine people who've had bad interactions, or who have, been fed this narrative, or have friends or something like that. So what are your thoughts on just that, people thinking that about you day to day when they see you?
I would say that the quickest, there is no quick change to that thought process. The change is going to be slow, and it will only be with the interactions and people actually meeting, someone like myself or my partners, going to calls and having positive interactions, and that word being spread in that way, that yes, you can rely on the police, and when they show up, they are going to take care of business, and they're going to be as just as they can, and they're going to be respectful. Without those contacts, those positive contacts, there isn't going to be change, because we don't affect the majority of the population, if that makes sense. The majority of the population relies on media. So the 911 calls that we're going to, if it's a shooting or a robbery or a really bad accident, that negativity is going to be on the news. It's not going to be, oh, this officer, helped this family violence victim get to the women's shelter, which is a day-to-day thing that multiple officers do, and there's not interviews with those victims that say, yes, they helped me out of this situation that, I don't think I would have been able to do by myself otherwise. So without getting the word out, and I thank you for interviewing me and kind of getting my perspective, without multiple resources doing that, there's not going to be really a rapid change, I don't think.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm doing it. And I think, would you say, like, in your town, that if you see a police officer and you have time, go introduce yourself? Like, form some sort of relationship. Because if I was in San Antonio now, and we just made each other and did this podcast, now if I see a police officer, I'd be like, oh, I know Clarissa, you have this like connection, and then it becomes a relationship thing. So if I was driving and I saw you behind me, I wouldn't be nervous, because I think in my head, I would go, oh, well, Clarissa, because we're like friends now, she's not going to just pull me over and give me a ticket for some nonsense. Like, I think, but like as if you would if you didn't know me. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I think, maybe relationships is just the best way to get over that. If you have a fear of police officers, or you have a distrust for police officers, what advice would I give to someone who has a distrust of anything, a distrust of Black people, a distrust of white people, a distrust of Republicans, whatever it is? Go talk to them. Get to know them a little bit. See that you are actually not that different. You have a lot of commonalities. You have a lot of common ground that you can stand on together. That's what I constantly promote on this podcast. And why shouldn't we do that with police officers as well?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So one more thing I do want to ask you, and then we can just talk about whatever, but how do you feel about, okay, this gets a little kind of deep, but let's just say the concept of free will. So I interview all these really smart, college professor people that make me feel really dumb, but some of them talk about free will and does that exist and things like that. If you take a kid who's from a really bad situation, really bad home life, really bad neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, falls into drugs, falls into gang violence. I taught a lot of kids like this. It's heartbreaking. It's really, really sad. They almost didn't have a shot. In a lot of ways, the odds were so skewed against them. Now, when I taught in those schools, I didn't say you don't have a shot. I said the opposite, and I believed it. You can, but it's going to be a lot of work to get out. And I'm going to do my part with my 2 hours I have with you every day. But you're up against a whole lot of stuff. Some of these kids it's just the trajectory that they're bound to be arrested by you someday. And it's horribly sad, but does that weigh on you? When you're busting a kid who has weed on him or something like that, is pot legal in Texas?
It is not.
Oh, okay. So see, even that's crazy state to state. But so a kid has weed on him where maybe he's, 21 years old. In California, it'd be fine. Cops are hey, high five, go smoke it. And then in certain other states, you get locked up in a cage. Does it ever weigh on you that this kid who's using it for his anxiety or something like that, there are elements of that too? Or a kid who even robbed a liquor store and because his friends pushed him into it, he didn't, and that was his only family. And I'm getting at these kids who are really tragic stories who are going to end up in the system. You are keeping us safe and you are upholding the law. You didn't write the law, but you're upholding it. That's your job. Does that ever weigh on you when you're I got to arrest this kid and I don't want to, but I have to?
There have been some situations where I have felt that way. And it is more so with those that are under 17, that aren't adults, that I feel that way. Because I feel children, and I say children in that they're not legally an adult yet, right, are more, there's still the flexibility of being able to mold them and maybe reason with them, versus an adult that this is their third robbery that they're being convicted of. And this is their life choice because they've already kind of suffered the consequences and still are choosing that lifestyle, versus a first time offender who may be a child who, the mother part of me kind of takes over at that point. And I do try and mentor and talk to those kids as much as possible. If I do have to arrest them on the way to, juvenile, or, find out information and ask them, is this what you want to do with the rest of your life? What changes are needed to be made to reach the goals that you want? Or, I ask them these things and in hopes that our little encounter / interview will last longer than, me talking to them for an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, I just recently, I documented a little bit on my social media, but a former student of mine, he's 22 now, works in a warehouse. Girlfriend broke up with him. He went to a liquor store, just was in a very destructive kind of headspace and stole 2 cases of beer. the shopkeeper ran him down, grabbed him. He had a knife on him because he works in a warehouse. So he had a box cutter, and he got arrested. And he was facing like 180 days in jail. I wrote a letter because I knew the kid from high school, and he wasn't like a bad kid, wasn't a gangbanger. It was his first time offense and stuff. And he got moved to house arrest, but he has a felony now on his record. It's like he knew it was wrong, but we do things that we know are wrong all the time. It's just one of those things where I told him, I'm like, I'm going to write this for you. And I'm going to say, even in the letter, and I did to the judge, like, give him this one, go easy on him this time. If he comes across in your courtroom again, go do whatever you need to do. But like, we believe in second chances, and we should believe in second chances. And talking to him afterwards, cause he like hit me up after he got out after 5 days, and just to thank me and tell me the story and stuff, is he was like, I learned my lesson. I know that when I make these kind of mistakes, that they're going to have long lasting repercussions. And I hope that's the case. I hope that we give second chances, that's the point of the system, and the correctional system is to rehabilitate to some degree. Like that's the goal anyway. Yeah, there are a lot of flaws in the prison system. I'll get to that in a future podcast, but one thing at a time. The goal is that they'll learn their lesson, just like you have kids, I have kids. They do something bad, you punish them. They go, okay, well, I learned. I'm not going to do that anymore. And I think that does happen. I'm sure you see that. The people who feel regret and they learn their lesson. Just because you're a criminal one day, you can change the trajectory of your life. Everyone does in some way or another. So, I think it's just got to weigh on. It takes a certain kind of personality, I think, to do your job, Clarissa. And I think that you have to kind of compartmentalize. Like, you can't get too invested in this one sad story kid, because then you won't be able to do your job. Right?
It's very, very true. Very true in the sense that as far as compartmentalizing goes, the things that we see daily, if you were to allow that to weigh on you, you would not only be able to do your job, but I don't think that any sound person that sees, bodies that have been ran over or have, some of these injuries that we see, would be able to live a normal life. They would potentially be on some type of medication to help them function daily. And that probably factors into why there's such a high alcoholism rate, amongst police officers.
Yeah.
And
self-medicating.
Right. And that's another, maybe another topic for another time, but in the sense that, the community looks to us to be the strong, the safekeepers, the peacekeepers. And sometimes it's forgotten that we are still human. Yeah. And so once, the uniform's taken off and we're there relaxing at home, like, what resources are there also for the mental health of police officers? And with our personalities as well, being most of us very alpha, many don't want to ask for help.
Right,
so that's also something that our department is starting to research and trying to, to get that stigma, that negative stigma out, that if something is bothering you, something is going on, that's reoccurring, to ask for help and to, reach out. So.
Yeah. And that's another thing to when in like the recruitment to get more people into the police departments, whatever city you're listening to this from, if you're trying to contribute to society, make society better, the best way you can do that is from the inside. So you said a lot of people are kind of alpha mentalities, or kind of like, like, I don't know if like meatheads the right words, but essentially there's a lot of that. There's a lot of people who love power and like to be in that position. I was actually, my freshman year in college was criminal justice. And then the professor, the first day was like, this is a job where you have power. And if you pull over a single mom, you can determine whether or not she, can like see her kids or something like really gross. And I was like, oh, I'm out. And I walked out and then went into education. I was like, this is so horrible. And I think that the more that if you don't like that mentality, then I probably, looking back, I'm glad I found teaching and I love what I do. But there's some level of, I didn't like that, I could have also gone, well, I'm going to change that. I'm going to be better than this guy who's running this thing. And, if you don't like the idea that the police department's filled with, kind of like alpha mentalities or people who are, kind of like quote unquote tough guys, like go in and just like we started this conversation off with, like you could bring something that's going to help make the idea of a police officer more robust and fill in the gaps, because there's going to be gaps in every field, and there's maybe a need for a different kind of view on things in the police departments, and that's only going to happen if individuals enlist, and people are going to do that. They're going to take, like you said, like San Antonio, you guys need officers, so you'll take who you can get as long as they're a criminal record and things like that. Like you're going to take them, so. Like it pays probably decent, but it's not a ton of money. Like it's in a lot of ways, it probably is similar to teaching. So unless the individual decides to go into it, I don't know. It's a lot harder to make these kinds of changes. And yeah, so that's just kind of where I'm thinking right now is if you have critiques, and this is a controversial thing, you don't have to become a police officer. Maybe go volunteer. Maybe go help, maybe go just, help with a fundraiser, or just get involved somehow in your community. And then that'll probably make the jobs easier for the police officers. And then they might be doing less of the behavior that you don't like, or something along those lines.
Yes. And also ride-alongs are they're a big way for citizens to participate and see what police officers do on a day-to-day basis. So basically they'll do a background check, and then for a full shift, they'll be paired with a police officer and be able to go through the duty day with them.
Who can do ride-along? Can I do a ride-along? Like in LA?
Yes.
Can I reach out to them?
Mm-hmm.
Love to.
Well, I don't want to speak for
No, yeah. But
that is
most cities do.
Right. So you would just contact your substation and then ask them what are the steps that you need to take to do a ride along.
I think I might do that. That would be really interesting. And then to just like talk about my experience. Okay. So, gotta go. What message do you want to send out? So my audience is varied, but it's a lot of young adults. So it's high school, early college age, and then high school teachers. So what kind of message would you have? What do you want to put out there? And then anything that you want to like plug or say, anything like that before we go?
A message that I would like to share would be just to remember that we are human as well. We feel, we love, we just have chosen a profession where we may have to make a decision with the facts that we have presented to us under some circumstances that, aren't planned for either. So we may have to make a split decision in, a matter of seconds, and to recognize that it is much more difficult than most may even know unless you go through that certain training. And so, to assist us in the spread of possible negativity on police officers, to educate themselves and possibly go on a ride along, or, introduce yourself to a police officer, like you were saying, and make that connection. So that way, the next time you see a police officer or a police vehicle, you have that positive relationship to fall back on.
Yeah. So as I said before, it seems like a nearly impossible job, or it's an impossible job to do perfectly. So thank you. And I think that hopefully a lot of people will see this or listen to this and be like, oh, okay, well, I guess cops aren't all bad or whatever. Like, I think that you represented the profession well in this interview. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for your service and for everything that you're doing. I think that the more officers that we have like you that talk the way that you do and are able to articulate kind of what it's going through, I think the better it's going to be for everyone in your profession and therefore everyone in your towns and society and things like that. So thank you, Clarissa. Thank you for doing this.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right, take care. This has been Cylinder Radio. The success of this podcast and the educational revolution that I hope you will be a part of is dependent on those who find value in it. Please take a few moments to review us on iTunes so the show is more easily found. If there was a perspective on today's topic that was not highlighted in this episode, or you have an idea for an episode topic that you want to understand more deeply, please email us at cylinderradio@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram @WillRusch. WILLREUSCH. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to the next one.